What do you want to be when you grow up? I actually used to hate this question growing up because, quite frankly, I really didn't have an answer. I would envy the kids who would be like, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a lawyer, or I want to be an astronaut, or whatever. How do they all know what they wanted to be? They seem to have their life together and their future in order, while I'm just kind of making it up as I go along. I mean, I enjoyed drawing and thought it was pretty cool, and I contemplated maybe even being an artist. I did take art classes and I enjoyed it. However, being that I was raised by immigrant parents, I was told to get a job that would be more practical and provide safety and stability, which, to be fair, in hindsight, is good advice. But at the time, it was demoralizing. It felt like a crushing of my dreams, like I couldn't actually do what I wanted and I had to do what I was told to or should do. The majority of my family decided to go down the medical route, but I wasn't really feeling like the med route was for me. Mind you, I still had no idea what the route was going to be for me. However, I did enjoy technology. I remember setting up our home desktop computer, hooking up our internet and home network, installing operating systems, and even building a computer at one point. Every time something went wrong or someone needed help with anything tech related, I was the one that people would call. And I enjoyed it. Like, I was really fascinated by trying to figure out and understand how these things worked and how I can fix them or how I can reverse engineer them. I went to collegiate high school, which pretty much just meant that I had the opportunity to take college level courses while in high school. That would actually count both towards my high school and for college credits. And if you're diligent enough, you could actually end up graduating high school with an associate's degree already under your belt. So me, being the overachiever that I was, did just that. So I settled on computer science to be a major in my career path. It was something I enjoyed, I found fascinating, as well as something that could be a safe and secure job in the future and would provide me with a sizable income. So, mystery solved. I have my direction in life, right? I grew up in a Christian household and was raised Christian. To be honest, it wasn't something that I really thought that deeply about. It was just the way I was raised, what I was told to believe, and how I was told to live. I didn't really have any animosity or resentment towards it, but also I didn't have any personal connection to it either. It was just something that was handed to me, not something I really chose for myself. However, now that I've graduated high school and I'm off to college, it was the first time I was going to be living away from home, away from my parents, away from my family, away from my church. I was on my own and could think and do and live however I wanted. I went to the University of Florida, and oddly enough, it was there where I actually grew closer to God. I remember going to church for the first week I arrived in Gainesville, and I met a couple people there who were also students at UF. And they were super nice, welcoming, and they were cool people. I'm not a very social person, but they made me feel comfortable and open with them. After church, we even went over to one of their places just to kind of continue to hang out and get to know each other, and we just started to really develop a real friendship. And we ended up kind of hanging out more and more as time went on. And one thing that really stood out to me was that these people seemed to be very enthusiastic about studying the Bible and seemed to not only choose to do so, but enjoy doing it as well, which was a foreign concept to me because most of my Christian life, if you were studying the Bible, it was something that you did almost begrudgingly or obligatorily, not something you did voluntarily or joyfully. So I'm like, what did they know that I didn't? What did they have that I didn't? So I started to study the Bible more and more with them and for myself. And the more I did that, the more I became convinced of the truth of the Bible. It was slowly becoming something that I believed for myself and came to the conclusion to follow for myself, and not just because it was how I was raised or what I was told to do or what I was told to believe. It was a choice that I made to follow God because I recognize who He is, what He's done for me, and how He loves me. And one thing that became more and more of a conviction as I grew closer to God was that I wanted my life to be one of ministry, of service to God and to people. Granted, I had no idea how that would even look like, but I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. I knew that I didn't necessarily want to be like a pastor or an evangelist or anything. That just didn't reflect that was my calling. But what was my calling? I don't know. So I guess we're back to square one of me not knowing what to do with my life. So I started to find out what my mission and purpose in life was, and I basically derailed my life in a way to do so. I left UF to go to a Bible work training program, after which I went to do Bible work for about a year. Basically, doing Bible work is just going door to door and offering Bible studies to people. Remember when I said that I wasn't a very social person? Somehow, that's how I wound up. That's what I wound up doing. But yeah, I also ended up going back to UF, but this time as a chaplain intern, and I worked also with a couple of nonprofits as well. Went to a couple of mission trips also. All of that to try to find my calling. And what did I discover? Nothing. Well, okay, maybe not nothing, but it wasn't quite clear yet. One thing I did realize is that through all the different things I was exploring, there was a common thread of people needing to feel heard, seen, cared for, obtain a level of guidance and support through their life struggles. And I was able to kind of see the positive impacts in people's lives through my time walking alongside with them. Eventually, I ended up going back to college, this time to a different university with a slightly different major. Well, I was still doing computer science, but I added a second major of biblical studies. I still didn't quite know what my calling was yet, but I still wanted to have that biblical foundation. I believe that at some point, God would make it clear to me what that was. However, something I didn't account for was that I fell into a deep depression. I won't go into all the details now, but there was a lot going on in my life at the time, and I didn't quite have the language to describe what it was that I was feeling. But I didn't feel like doing anything. Like, I felt lethargic. I stopped keeping up with my hygiene. Everything felt so effortful. I could barely drive myself out of bed at times. I didn't care about anything. Like, I was barely going to classes. I was barely doing my homework or my assignments. I could barely focus on anything, quite frankly. I actually was failing a lot of my courses. I wasn't really talking to people like that either. And my relationship with God was also deteriorating. And so, yeah, I just felt apathetic, numb, and just overall melancholic. I didn't really know who I could even talk to about this. But one day when I actually went into class, one of my professors shared something that really resonated with me. And I basically just described what I was feeling. Oddly enough, it was one of my computer science professors. And out of all the professors I had at the time, he was like the one that I actually felt the most comfortable talking to. So after class, I went to his office to talk to him, and I told him about what I was experiencing and how I was feeling, and he just kind of sat and listened and empathized with me. And he suggested that I go speak to a counselor. Now, at first, I'll be real, like, I kind of scoffed at the idea, like, I didn't need therapy. I'll figure it out myself. I'll get over it. I'll figure it out. I'll just try harder and so on and so forth. And so I didn't go. And as you may have guessed, nothing changed. If anything, things kind of got worse. My grades plummeted. My connection with God went down there with them. My sense of apathy was alive and strong. So it got to a point where I just reluctantly decided to go. I really didn't know what to expect or anything, but I went. And as I was going to my sessions, I realized two things. One, that was actually helping, but two, and more importantly, I finally got the clarity I was waiting for. I finally got the clarity on my purpose in life. It was to be a counselor. The through line of all things that I was doing in my exploration stage, the thing that I was doing was counseling, albeit a rudimentary form of it, but counseling nonetheless. I didn't know how to describe it at the time, but it just felt like everything just kind of clicked for me, and I finally found my calling, I found my purpose. But to wrap up this little story of my undergrad, so I still was failing all my classes. quite miserably. But because I was seeking therapy, I was able to get a doctor's note, which I showed to my professors, and they then allowed me to like get an extension on my assignments and be able to still turn them in, even though they were way past the due date. And that one professor that I spoke to that actually suggested I go speak to a counselor. He was very supportive of me and in my corner the whole time. And he actually went out of his way to even create like a direct study course with just me in it, just so I can finish up all my required credits that I needed for my degree, since I failed his course. And if it wasn't for him, like I wouldn't have been able to actually get my degree. So shout out to Professor Ordonez for having compassion, understanding, and helping me through that time in my life. It was a struggle, but I did end up graduating with my bachelor's degree in computer science and biblical studies. So now you will think that I know my calling, I know my purpose, and that now I can just go out there and do it, right? That would make sense, but no, that's actually not what happened. Why? Because I was too fearful to pursue it. All those thoughts of having a stable and safe and secure career came rushing back in. All sorts of fears and doubts about whether I'd be able to sustain myself and how I'll be making way less money as a counselor as I would if I just stayed in tech as an engineer, and so on and so forth. It's funny because like I kept praying to God for like direction, but I got nothing. Well, at least nothing new. It was just kind of like basically pointing back to what was revealed before. Like, why are you asking me for new direction when you haven't even done the last thing I told you to do? So this went on for some time, for 3 years. Yes, 3 years of me going back and forth with God and my calling and purpose, and allowing my fears and doubts to kind of hold me back. And during that time, I found myself slowly falling out of love with my engineering job. I mean, sure, like I did everything that I was told to do. I mean, I went to school, I made something that was safe and stable, I got a degree, I got a job, I was making good money, I was living comfortably, but I just didn't feel fulfilled. Not that there's anything wrong with working as a software engineer or anything, but I just knew that that wasn't my purpose or calling in life. It was just a job that was not bringing me fulfillment. So finally, after years of resisting, I took a leap of faith and started applying to grad schools. I don't know what took me so long, but I was glad I finally did it. I was happy to finally be aligning my life with what God revealed to me was His calling and purpose for me. So I wrote my essays, got my letters of recommendations, completed all my applications, paid all those fees, and submitted. Now it's just a waiting game to see who would reach out and accept me. This was a very interesting span of months in my life, mainly because nothing seemed to go as planned. So I worked as a contractor, and for the last 3 years, my contract has been being renewed with the client I was working with at the time. But that year, they didn't renew my contract, and so my contract would have ended that June. At the same time, my lease at my apartment was ending also in June. So I figured, well, there's no point in me renewing my lease, being that my contract is going to be ending as well. And I probably won't have my new contract being in the same city, so I have to move away anyway. And at the same time, I was also applying to grad school, so if anything, I'd probably end up having to move to my grad school location anyway. So that in mind, I decided I'll just put all my stuff in the storage unit, and I'll fly back home to Florida and just kind of stay there for a couple weeks, and then I'll just wait. I'd either get a new contract and go to a new location for my client, or get accepted to grad school and end up moving there. Either way, whatever came first, I'd be moving. And you know what happened? Well, I didn't get accepted to any of the grad schools I applied to, and I was on bench with my contracting company, and that year also was 2020. Yes, 2020. So due to the pandemic and everything being shut down, and what I thought would be me staying in Florida for a couple of weeks ended up being me staying there for a little over a year. So here I am at home, no job, not accepted to any grad schools, and as you can imagine, I was quite confused. Like, I thought I was doing what God called me to do, and that it should just work. Why is it not going according to plan? Now let me go on a little side story tangent for a little bit, and I promise you it will connect back to the main storyline. So my initial contract ended up being a client based in Milwaukee, and so I moved from Florida to Wisconsin for work. And this client ended up renewing my contract 3 times, meaning that I stayed in Milwaukee for 3 years. While in Milwaukee, one thing I was trying to find was a church home, right? Because 2 things that are important for me to find whenever I move anywhere is a good barber and a good church. However, although I visited many churches in the Milwaukee area, I just didn't quite find one that resonated or connected with me. So after a while, I just stopped going to church. I would front like, oh yeah, I'll just do church at home. But yeah, even that kind of fell off after a while. And I felt myself growing distant from God again. So after maybe a year and a half or so of not going to church, I decided to try again. This time to maybe broaden my horizons a little bit and explore different areas. One of the areas I ended up exploring was Chicago. Chicago was about an hour and some change drive away from Milwaukee, depending on traffic, of course. But I would drive down to Chicago and visit different churches to see if I would find one that connected with me. And I eventually did. I found a church in Chicago that really reminded me of the church community that I had at UF. And I would literally drive to Chicago almost every weekend to go to that church. I met a bunch of great people and made some good friends and got familiar with the area, and I really liked it. And I was like, well, I can really see myself living here. Okay, so fast forward back to me being in Florida during the pandemic. So it was late into the summer, and it was about to be fall, and I was just putting in a last-ditch effort to decide to apply to other schools and see what would happen. So I was specifically looking for schools that were accredited with a path to licensure and were still accepting applications, obviously. Another criteria I had before that I ended up dropping was the program had to be a Christian or biblically based because, well, all the Christian colleges I applied to rejected me. So lo and behold, the grad school I ended up finding was in Chicago. It met all the academic criteria. It was a place where I was already familiar with, and my stuff was not that far because my stuff was still in Milwaukee at the time. And I already had a church community there as well. So it's kind of like a win-win-win all around. And so I applied. Shout out to Dr. Parker and Dr. Paris, who wrote letters of recommendations for me. I got called in for an interview, and not long afterwards, I got my acceptance letter. So I was in the master's program for clinical mental health counseling. All should go well now, right? So I got in, but it wasn't smooth sailing from there. Matter of fact, it was quite the opposite. So being that it was during pandemic times, everything was remote. Classes were remote, and I ended up getting a new contract at work, which also ended up being remote. And this setup was actually ideal, as doing school and work at the same time was a lot easier when both were remote. I literally just have both my laptops up and switch between them every now and again. Everything was going great. Well, until the second year of grad school came along. So part of the program is doing a practicum and internship, which basically is you working on site as a counselor, providing services to people. It is part of your training as like, the only way you can really learn to be a counselor is to, well, provide counseling to real people. And so mind you, this is also unpaid. Your payment is the experience, basically. So we applied to different sites and we hoped to match with one of them for our internship. And the site that I got matched with was a hospital, and I would have to be in person and on site. They originally stated that we would start in July. Cool. So I planned and ended up moving to Chicago in June, just so I can get everything moved and acclimated for when I would start in July. So I got to Chicago, checked out apartments, signed my new lease, paid a deposit, first month's rent, move in. Come to find out, our start date gets pushed back to August. Cool, no problem. Come to find out again, our start date gets pushed back to September now. Now I'm here like, why am I in Chicago paying rent when I really don't have to be here? Like, I could have just saved 3 months of rent and my deposit and utilities if I just stayed home in Florida this whole time. But whatever, we're here now. Another difficulty that I kind of faced was that not only was the internship in person, but they also decided to have classes be in person as well. Meaning working would be very difficult for me to do because I can't work a full-time job, be at school full-time and in person, and also to be at my internship in person as well, all simultaneously. I mean, I tried, I really did, but I failed miserably. I ended up getting let go from my engineering job as I was unable to maintain the hours they were asking me to work due to my school internship schedule. So now I have no job, I have rent to pay, bills to pay, tuition to pay. I have no income coming in. I tried to survive on my savings, but after a while, that started to dry up. And again, I started getting frustrated at God, like, why am I doing what you call me to do, yet I'm struggling? I thought it would just all work out, but it's just one thing after another. I was able to get like a short-term job here and there, and I was able to kind of maintain just long enough to get enough of a paycheck to pay bills. I wish I didn't want to. I ended up actually taking out loans, private loans at that. And eventually, even it got really bad that I reached out to my sisters to help me out and give me some funds as well. It got so bad that I literally got an email saying that if I didn't pay my outstanding balance of my rent, I would be evicted. Jobless, no money, about to be evicted, all because I was seeking the calling and purpose that I felt God had for me. And this is a whole other story we don't really want to get into right now, but I also got scammed out of like $2,500 from a job because the company got hacked, and it was a whole thing. But anyway, needless to say, struggle bus through and through. I will say though, it was all worth it. I ended up getting a job as a counselor right before graduation, and I've been working there ever since, and I do find my job fulfilling. I mean, sure, I don't make nearly as much as I did when I was a software engineer, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Being able to help people see their growth and progress, see how their lives change for the better, being able to walk alongside them and support them during the difficult times, having them feel heard and seen, and reminding them that they do matter and they are valued, that all makes it worthwhile. So seeking life's purpose is what brought me here to this point in my life. And that is part of what I want to share with you here on this channel. This is meant to be an educational channel where I share what I've learned in my journey becoming a therapist and what I'm continuing to learn as a therapist. Things I find interesting, helpful tips, stories, reflections, psychoeducation, skills, resources, and just personal thoughts on psychological topics. All that hopefully to help you along your journey to your mental and emotional well-being and fulfilling life's purpose, whatever that may be for you. So, until next time, all the best.